The 1960s are remembered for peace signs, Woodstock, and the moon landing. But they were also marked by political assassinations, racial violence, riots, a controversial war, student protest, and one of the greatest cultural revolutions in American history. So, how did one decade manage to change everything? The 1960s represented a collision between two different Americas, the traditional versus the progressive, the young versus the old, the authority versus individualism, and optimism versus cynicism. By 1969, the country looked almost nothing like it had in 1960. Now, before we talk about the 60s, I'd like to go back to our 50s conversation that we had in the last episode. Now, 50s are often romanticized with this kind of white picket fence mentality. You know, you've got your economic prosperity, suburban expansion, the highway becomes a thing. Television becomes a centerpiece of American homes. The baby boom generation, traditional family ideas, anti-communism, McCarthyism, and everyone seems like they're finally producing the American dream. But beneath the surface, there were real issues that were being ignored. There was Jim Crow segregation, limited opportunities for women, poverty, Hispanic discrimination, Native American displacement, LGBTQ people forced underground, Cold War fears, and the worst one of all, nuclear anxiety. So the first topic I'd like to cover is television kind of being America's mirror. Because the 60s, 50s, the television is introduced, but by the 60s, pretty much everyone has a television. It's kind of like standard practice at this point. And, they're viewing civil rights protests, police violence, Vietnam, the moon landing, political assassinations, political conventions. Television erased distance. And one of the first big examples of this becoming a thing is during the election of JFK. So JFK is running in 1960 for president as a Democrat against Richard Nixon, a Republican. And television kind of changed the campaigning because there's this whole thing where they're having their debates. They're the first televised debates for the presidential election. And um, if you it was kind of a weird shift because if you watch the debates as opposed to listen to the debates, you thought two different candidates won. If you listen to the debates, a lot of people thought that Nixon won because of how he answered the questions and how he came across. But if you watch the debates, which a lot of people did too, you got to see something different. You see Nixon, he's kind of sweating, seems a bit unkept. He's like, has a bit of stubble, a bit of a 5 o'clock shadow, while Kennedy seems confident, clean shaven, and a bit more put together. And that kind of stuff just kind of helps. It becomes more of a visual thing um, than it had been before. And it leads, not entirely, but it definitely had a hand in helping Kennedy win the election in 1960. Kennedy is the youngest elected president at the time. He's also a Catholic, which is controversial. And he gives this like new frontier speech a little after he's gets the nomination for president. And he talks about the space race, which was like a big thing because they wanted to defeat the Soviets. He wanted to give federal aid for education, government health insurance for elders, combat poverty, and do more for civil rights. Now, space exploration was a big thing. As I said before, Soviets got to beat them. And just it seemed like it was a big thing back then, as opposed to now where space isn't really like something that we see brought up as much as it was back then. It's not as important because we kind of went to the moon and that was it. We didn't go to Jupiter, we didn't go to any other planet really. I think we went to Mars. I'm pretty sure. At least the rover did. And Matt Damon in that one movie.
Yeah, and I think the rover counts as a US citizen. I love him.
Yeah.
All the rovers, I love all of them.
Dual citizenship, I would say. I think he's a Mars citizen as well.
Yeah, and you know what? Dare I say, I think I like them more than Gilman.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
I know.
I can't picture what a Mars rover looks like right now. All I'm thinking is Wally.
Not uh, not too far off if you just kinda, like, reconfigure him a little bit. You kinda sort of get there. But, like, I'm just sitting here because like, having, like, televisions kind of pop off for the first time, like, imagine seeing that for the first time. It's like, that's what they've been talking about? Like, everything just seems so much bigger than what it is, and it's kinda like that juxtaposition of having, like of just using your imagination based off what you're hearing and actually, like, visually seeing it. Um, like, I love, the idea of like, listening to the presidential debate via radio or via television because you just already see it 'cause people are like, "Oh, yeah, it's so clear, like, he's a shoo-in," and it's like, "No, he's not. Did you see him?" They're like, "Did you what?" Like, how'd you get there? How'd you see him?"
How'd you get there? So, what do you know about the Bay of Pigs or the Cuban Missile Crisis? Because those are two big events that happened pretty early on in JFK's career. Um, you might have learned about them in, I'm assuming, AP US history?
Yeah, yeah, one of the US histories. I know that they failed,
Yes.
and it was yeah, it was, like, the failed missile crisis to try, and overthrow Castro, and then, um I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. I'm gonna look so stupid, but I'm like, I just know it was just so messy because not only did they fail, but then like then they're just like in a standoff because they're like, oh well, it didn't work. Well, I'm still gonna shoot you, and they're like, well, nice try, Buckaroo. Like, it's a standoff now. And then
Yes,
now it's
that's
like
what Khrushchev said. Nice try, Buckaroo.
That's exactly. "Nice try, buddy. You're not gonna get it done." And they're like, "Well, buckaroo, I'm gonna shoot you anyway." But they didn't, I don't think, and then they're just on the brink of a war. They couldn't even commit to the full war. They're just, like, standing off, and I'm like, "Pfft, okay, say you're a coward." I'm just kidding, like, you shouldn't just, like, start a war, like, just because, but,
Yeah.
like
So it was a lot of just like overconfidence and just like thinking that like they had to like counter one another. And yeah, it's crazy how like a year, 2 years into his presidency, just everything almost ended like that.
Yeah. It's like, well, really coming in with a bang, you know?
Yeah.
And
Well, not a bang.
maybe the intention was a big boom,
Yes.
and it ended up being like the I don't know, I guess the equivalent of a pen dropping, where
Yes.
it's like, yeah, you can hear it, but is everybody gonna turn around and see what it is? I don't think so.
So the next topic is the civil rights movement. Now, before we talk about the civil rights movement, we had to talk about why there needed to be a civil rights movement. We had things like segregation, which, for those of you who don't know, is kind of a thing where you would separate based on certain groups, kind of like differences. And in this case, it was race. So, you'd have whites only bathroom signs or whites only water fountains, which is crazy because it's a water fountain. But uh, you had Jim Crow laws, which I didn't know this. The term originates from an 1820s minstrel show called Jump Jim Crow, performed by this white actor, Thomas Dartmouth Rice. And he wore like blackface, of course, because a minstrel show. And basically, following Reconstruction, which was like this period of like trying to help rebuild after the Civil War and help African Americans kind of uh, gain back a little more of what they had lost through slavery. Um, they wanted to, southern states in particular, pass laws to reverse the political and economic gains made by Black Americans. And this was kind of upheld by the 1896 case Plessy versus Ferguson, which established the separate but equal doctrine. Uh, and just over time, as the 1800s turned to the 1900s, just things got worse and worse. Public facilities for Black citizens are almost either underfunded, inferior, or non-existent. And the segregation, it was pretty much like society wide. It was schools, transportation, restaurants, hospitals, restrooms, as I said before. Disenfranchisement was another thing they did. This is they would use things like poll taxes, they would use literacy tests, and they would use violent intimidation to just prevent African Americans from voting. And then also anti miscegenation, miscegenation. I don't know how to pronounce that word. I wish I had looked it up beforehand. But basically, it's laws making it illegal for white and Black people to kind of interlope. Yeah. And so I'm glad those laws don't exist anymore because you and I wouldn't be able to do this podcast. And a crazier thing about this whole thing is that the last state to remove their anti miscegen. This is gonna kill me. I gotta look it up. I gotta look it up.
I've read it before multiple times. I don't think I've ever said it out loud though, so I also don't know how to pronounce it.
Okay. It is miscegenation. Miscegenation. Yeah,
I guess
miscegenation.
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. But Alabama was the last one to like, I guess, symbolically remove this from their like legislature in 2000.
Of course they
So,
were. They'd rather people just, like, kiss their siblings and shit. They'd rather
well,
that.
they are the same race, so that would be okay. You know,
Oh, yeah, I guess you're right.
yeah,
Oh, Alabama. Oh,
sweet
Alabama.
home.
Allegedly.
Some major movements from the civil rights movement. First, we've got the one that I think all of us know about, Rosa Parks, December 1st, 1955. She's arrested for refusing to give up her seat to a white man on a Montgomery City bus. Basically, if there were no seats for the white people, or if they needed seats for white people, and there was someone black sitting there, they had to go to the back. Rosa Parks declined to give up her seat and move to the back, so she was arrested. That in turn activates the Montgomery bus boycott from a whole year, 1955 to December 1966. It's very successful. In February, the city rejected the compromise on seat assignments and began to use harassment, including arresting carpoolers, which arresting carpoolers is insane, and arresting leaders, including Dr. Martin Luther King. Violence escalates, including the bombing of homes of boycott supporters in August, which, gosh, you guys have a lot of free time to do this. Like, this is way too much free time to do all this in terms of
Yeah.
bombing people, arresting people, just harassing people. People just used to have more time back then before they were on their phones. You know, now we have phones. We don't have time to get up together.
Build
Just,
bombs together.
yeah,
Bomb people.
yeah. Um, but the Supreme Court actually helped out this time, and they upheld a lower court decision in a case called Browder versus Gale, declaring that segregated buses were unconstitutional in November, and the boycott ended the next month in December. There were sit-ins, a form of civil disobedience, where they would just go to like whites only lunch counters. Specifically, there was one in Greensboro, North Carolina, where they sat at a whites only lunch counter and they politely requested service. And then when they denied, they refused to leave, which is nothing really. Um, but it's like civil disobedience because you're just like kind of politely saying, yeah, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to do anything, but there's nothing you can do about it. And it led to several student sit-ins across 20 states and had about 70,000 participants. We've got
Period.
Freedom Riders, which is not to be confused with the film of the same name that is called Freedom Riders. This is Freedom Riders, as in riding a bus, as in riding interstate buses into segregated American South in 1961. Little Rock, the Little Rock Nine. This is the story I always think of when I think I don't want to go to school. It's just like it's not that bad. Things could have been worse. Little Rock Nine, basically, when Brown versus Board of Education uh, is reaches its outcome, and they're said to like desegregate schools. Um, the National Guard was called in Arkansas to prevent um students from like going into school. So Dwight Eisenhower calls in his own National Guard to help the students get into schools. It's a whole thing. You got people from like both from surrounding the school screaming at these kids, throwing shit at them to just like get the fuck out of this school. You don't belong here, with all the slurs that they can possibly imagine. Um, we've got about 9 kids, like I said, Little Rock Nine, and just intense harassment, violence, hostility from all these segregationists throughout the school year. Not a great way to spend your senior year. One of them was a senior and graduated that year. So I'm sure prom wasn't fun. I'll say that. Uh, yeah. And then kind of like the peak of the civil rights movement is the March on Washington, which happened in the early 1960s. Over 250,000 peaceful protesters marched to DC to advocate for civil rights legislation and economic justice. And it was kind of curtailed um, by Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, you know, content judged by the content of your character, not the color of your skin. And iconic speech, free at last. So it reminded me of free at last. That speech, heard it all the time when I was younger. Um, read books about it when I was a kid. Very good speech, very, very influential speech. And speaking of Martin Luther King, I also want to talk about him versus Malcolm X, kind of like the two biggest figures of the civil rights movement. Um, they're known together usually because they're clashing ideas. Martin Luther King is civil disobedience. Malcolm X is by any means necessary, even if that means violence to achieve their goals. Where Martin Luther King is integration, Malcolm X is black nationalism, and he was a bit more on the separation side. And yeah, it's kind of interesting, the two of them, how they kind of thought, and how some of their ideas seem to go in hand with one another, but some of them seem to clash. And it seems that like near the end of both their lives, they kind of saw things in a different way. And it kind of sucks that like people like that um didn't really seem to get along until like the very end. But it's how it goes sometimes with people with different ideas.
Yeah.
But oh, sorry.
No, you're good. It's like it's like the contrasting ideas to get to the same or a similar goal. So then it's like you can't really meet in the middle, but that's kind of like what the ideal place is, because it's just kind of like the two extremes of it. And it's always super interesting to look back on it, but then also seeing like the patterns of just like political violence and everything now where that's kinda how it is. There's only 2 extremes that can exist, and there's no gray area for a lot of people, and then it's like, actually, like, there's a lot of people that want more out of life and want to be able to feel comfortable taking up space because they have the right to, and they don't wanna blow up anybody. Like, there is a middle ground. There's more things you can do, but with the heightened tensions at the time, I don't blame them for just being stuck in their ideals. It's what they thought was right, and they both were doing good work and was getting they both were having an effect, which is the biggest thing. But it's also interesting because it's like, "Oh, so, like, that could work," even though we're like, "No, that's not the best way," and then it's like, "Oh, but that could work too." Well, they can meet in the middle.
Indeed. Also, if you didn't know this and you can't tell, if you've ever read X-Men or watched X-Men, Professor X is just Martin Luther King, and Magneto is Malcolm X. So,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. All of those comics from that parallel this time, oh my god, it is so like, matching them up to, like, real life event oh, it's so cool.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
So, there is a positive that comes out of all of this protesting and kind of um, the stuff that they're doing and working to achieve. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act gets passed, legally dismantling the Jim Crow system by allowing segregation in public spaces and prohibiting discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin across voting, education, and employment. Along with that, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 um, outlaws the Jim Crow um, the Jim Crow system by um basically prohibiting people from like discriminating against you and not allowing you to vote the way they did before in like the test essentially that they gave before. And the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which prohibits discrimination in nearly all housing activities based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, yada yada, familial status, disability, and so on and so on. So we're getting somewhere, right? Not exactly. Because then
There's
we got
always more.
Vietnam.
There's always
Yes.
more to usurp the
Yes.
whimsy of civil rights.
The whimsy of civil rights. I don't know why when you said whimsy of civil rights, I just thought like all the civil rights leaders like frolicking in a field.
It's like hand in hand.
Yeah. So now I want to talk about Vietnam. Before we talk about Vietnam, we got to talk about communism. Americans don't like communism at this time. And they followed the policy of containment, which is prevent the expansion from communism. And they did this by giving economic aid or preventing alliances with countries like Greece or Turkey. And they also believe in this domino theory that if one nation essentially fell to communism, that neighboring countries would inevitably follow, like a row of like dominoes, not to be confused with the pizza chain of the same name.
Yeah.
And they use this to essentially justify military operations. And things got really intense. Like you thought Bay of Pigs and Cuban Missile Crisis was intense. No, things got even crazier in 1965 when the United States, who was already in Vietnam to some degree, rapidly increased military forces. Uh, prompted by the realization that the South Vietnamese government was losing the Vietnam War as the communist dominated Viet Cong gained influence over the population in the rural areas of the country. And that's where our kind of entry into Vietnam really expands. 64, they began a draft. Not fun. At first, it was just like the oldest guys go first, but then in 1969, they began a televised lottery, very similar to the Hunger Games of just, picking people as tribute to go off and fight and die for some war, this proxy war.
Yeah,
Um,
and with the war too, because they have, a huge, like, uh, memorial to Vietnam done at, MCRD, and I'm sure, like, at some of the other military bases, um, they have to have something, but it's so interesting because 'cause they're doing the lottery, but they're also so adamant on this war, and they aren't training their troops well enough because they're going into Vietnam, which is primarily jungles and all of these different environments that they are not used to. They're training on beaches. They're training in the water on the coast, and there's just none of that there. So then they were like, "Oh no, we're sending all these kids to war and they're not winning." And it's like, I wonder why. I wonder why they're not winning. And then they just kept going like, "Oh, well, I guess we just got to go younger."
so not everyone had to fight, though. You could defer. For example, if you were a college student, particularly a wealthy college student,
Cuz you had to
or
be able to afford it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
college was not for the poor these days unless you had a scholarship. And a lot of famous people, including one who's in office right now, deferred from the Vietnam draft. Um, colleges, but it's not like everything's all great at colleges. A lot of students are protesting. Um, there were early teach-ins. There were draft card burnings, which is like the card you get when like you find out you're drafted, and you're like, oh, here's your card. Report immediately to the nearest military center or whatever, and marches and things got to kind of like a boiling point in 1970 when first on May 1st the first nationwide student strike erupted. Students walked out of classrooms on nearly 90, or not 90, 900 campuses across the US. And then a few days later, at Kent State, the Ohio National Guard was called in to manage protests, and the guardsmen opened fire on a crowd of unarmed students, killing four and wounding nine. So, yeah, not the best time to be in college, especially you thought finals were difficult, and then you got all this. So
Yeah. Yeah.
next we have the Tet Offensive. Now, the Tet Offensive is a really big turning point for the war. It was like a massive coordinated attack by the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces on over 100 South Vietnamese cities. And though the communists got defeated, it served as a major strategic and psychological victory because they attacked the major urban centers and even penetrated the U.S. Embassy around Saigon. They kind of shattered this illusion that America was close to winning the war when in fact they were not. And it also showed this was like this is the first war to be shown on television, and this was like a big story when it happened because it just shows like the brutal fighting, um and kind of kind of kind of sucks because yeah, it totally sucks, but like you think about it, we're not doing well at home, but we're also not doing well overseas. Where are we doing well? What's happening?
Yeah. Because again, like, television is making everything it's making people realize how big all these issues actually are and how, like, especially, like, war specifically, it's so easy to be, like, swayed by just somebody going like, "Oh, like, I it's gonna" I was like, I'm assuming they're not going like, "Oh, a war update, and that's the segment," and then, like, they go into it, they're like, "The military has what's best for you, and we are winning the war, we are defeating, we are, like, thriving as a country," and then you have the actual footage, and it's like, you're saying either they're sticking to the thing that they are winning, and they're really going with that narrative, but then you see all the destruction and all the people that are either killed, affected, this just demolition of countries that I don't think anybody could ever fully grasp the severity of before, because it's just up to their imagination. And at this time, it's like, well, how could you even imagine something so devastating? And it's like you have that fear because it's like the full unknown, but being able to see everything for the first time is it's like this is the perfect turning point for people to actually start rebelling because now they can actually see. It's like, no, like you're lying. You're literally lying. Like, are you seeing what we are? Because I don't think you are. It's like there's only so far that it's like the script doesn't match the actual like images of what's happening. And it's like, girl, you got to get somebody to adjust this or like work harder, do something because. And then it's like they're wondering why people are rebelling against war. I'm like, um, gee willikers, whose fault is that? I wonder. I wonder. Or sorry, actually, they're probably just all communists. They're probably just all communists trying to take over America. Huh.
It kind of reminds me of like essentially like when you do something bad when you're a kid and your mom's like, I saw you. It's like everyone in America just being like, did you get us into a proxy war with the communist? And they're like, no. And they're like, I saw you. I saw the Tet Offensive, you know?
Yeah, literally.
Um, and of course, when you have all these people kind of thinking one way, and then you have these kind of shifting, conflicting ideas among different generations, you're going to get a counter. And that's where we get the counterculture, man. It's all cool and it's like a different way of thinking. And, you know, we get the hippie
Mhm.
movement, no
Oh yeah.
materialism, no conformity. We're just kind of living our lives. And yeah, just we've got the Summer of Love, big moment from the counterculture movement. 1967, 100,000 young people gathered to reject mainstream values, like championing peace, free love, which has multiple meanings, and communal living while protesting the Vietnam War. This was a mix of college students. You got your anti-war activists and just, just some artists, just people want to make music. People want to deal with their art. And yeah, we've got very um, uh, impactful music events like the Monterey International Pop Festival and the release of groundbreaking albums such as the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Oh yeah. We love art because art is inherently political. People that are saying art is not political, you're a liar. And there's just it's always been so inherently political, and it's such a powerful tool and a great way to express and safely commentate on the issues with modern society. Ah, we love the summer of love. Go hippies.
And another thing they did then, drug experimentation. So these two
True.
guys, Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, conducted high-profile LSD experiments on grad students at Harvard University. So yeah, that was the thing
Wait,
they did. They just took
uh,
LSD at Harvard in the
and
60s.
just because it was like, is it like the expanding mind sort of
Yeah.
idea where they
Yeah,
okay,
free your head or
fair
no,
enough.
feed your head.
Okay.
Um and then Ken Casey and his group, the Merry Pranksters, which doesn't sound like a it sounds like a funny name for like a group, the Merry Pranksters. Sounds like a Christmas group.
They can't be the cynical pranksters.
Yeah, they're merry.
They're merry.
Um, they hosted these parties called acid tests, which combined heavy LSD use with early light shows and live music from the Grateful Dead. I haven't listened to a lot of the Grateful Dead, but those who I know have listened to it, it's very much a drug friendly band. And this is cool, man. We're just expanding our mind and seeing what's out there and just taking things and just having fun. That is until the government, the man, goes and schedules it as or classifies it as a Schedule 1 drug. So it's no longer recreational. It's no longer fun. So now it's, yeah, boo.
Boo. How dare you?
But there is another drug that comes about around this time, and it's called a contraceptive pill, or better yet, better known as birth control. And that, combined with second wave feminism and this kind of counterculture thing we've been talking about, leads to this like sexual revolution. There's destigmatization about premarital sex. That was like a big thing. Everyone's like, oh my God, you guys are having sex, but you're not married? This is wild. We can we can talk about this kind of stuff. You can talk about premarital sex, you can talk about homosexuality, you can talk about sexual desire, you know. You can talk about, you know, it doesn't have to be something that you just keep to yourself and kind of be behind closed doors. You can talk about it whenever you want. You can talk about as much as you want and how much you want, and yeah, free
Yeah.
love.
And I think a big part of this movement too was kind of questioning like why is there so much stigmatization around or stigmatization around these very natural like urges and things where it's like so condemned and then it's just like that sort of like guilt mongering sort of thing where it's like, well, I don't want to feel it, but I do. It's so nice to see it just not be demonized. And it's like obviously like if you're 9, like don't go like shagging people or anything, but like being able to finally like explore this about yourself and kind of like be open-minded, I feel like was so pivotal because then that kind of stemmed for everything else to kind of fall into place of like, okay, well then if like we're able to question these things that are just like so human about us, then why do we have to stand by these things that are making us feel um like not human, these different laws and wars are making us feel erased from our own society that we are like I almost said paying citizens. I don't know if all of them are paying yet. Maybe. Anyway, they were active citizens in their society though, regardless, because they're rebelling into the counterculture. Ugh. Also, go gays. I love you
Yeah.
gays.
Well, some of them were paying, some of them weren't, because they did have communes around this time. They wanted to be self
Yeah.
sufficient and live off the grid. So that was also a
Mhm.
thing.
True. Yeah, I was like, I knew that there were some, and I was like, I knew it wasn't all of them, but I couldn't remember if it yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is a fine line though between like what was a commune and what was a cult though. And I don't think they really realized it until
Yeah.
some guy named Charles, he didn't get the record deal he wanted, so he just decided to, act out on some ideas he had. But we'll get to that because we're going
Yeah.
into music now. Because rock music is becoming political.
Yes.
I
Yes.
already mentioned the Monterey Pop Festival. There's also Woodstock, an iconic event in 1969. We've got the British invasion, as we talked about the previous episode. You know, Beatles kind of go from this kind of poppy, I want to hold your hand, to more like you say you want a revolution. And that's even one of the key songs from this decade, kind of talking about everything. There's revolution, there's for what it's worth, there's a change is going to come, and then there's the times they are changing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it feels like all music from this era is kind of, there's hidden messages between it. Like there are some songs that, like, if you look at like the decade, like beginning of the decade, their songs are still very much 50 songs to some degree. But mid to late 60s, everything's got a message.
Yeah. And then it's like the either and then it's like the spectrum of how do you hide the message? Or is it because I love like the hidden meanings of songs where it's like people listen to it and it's like, ah, this is such a good, fun, happy song. And it's like, no, it's not. Have you listened to the lyrics? And it's like, oh, it's like we love the duality of music. And again, all art is political. Go art. Go thriving arts. Except not the arts that lead to cults or anything. That's not good. Don't do that. They should have just listened to me. They should hear me now in, like, the space-time continuum telling them to not do that and to keep making art, like, progressively and, like, for the good of humanity, and they won't do that. They won't listen to me all the way down the space-time continuum line.
What a shame.
Crazy. I have so much influence.
Yeah, and so do women, because in this decade, there's a women's liberation. The personal is political. We really kind of start to focus on domestic inequality, sexual autonomy, and marital roles with broader political systems, arguing that a woman's daily life was so deeply affected by societal power structures. Um, there's consciousness raising where like all these women are kind of meeting to share their experiences. So it's just like, oh, you also like he gets mad when you let the can opener rust. Oh yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. He threw milk at me because I didn't make the steak the way he wanted it the right way. Yeah, and it's just certain stuff like that that's building up, and it's like essentially Robin Williams. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Um, and this also comes to a head. Get the Equal Pay Act of 1963, finally abolishing wage disparity based on sex, laying the groundwork for future fair wage lawsuits. Many of those there are. And like I said before, FDA approved the birth control pill in 1960, and Roe v. Wade, before it was overturned, expanded control over reproductive health.
Wow!
Yeah. Some big steps. Big steps.
So big. So needed.
Yeah.
So needed. Even saying, even now, it's more needed. We should bring this back.
Yeah.
Let's keep rebelling.
Everyone should be a little less like Donna Reed and more like Mary Tyler Moore in a way.
Mhm.
Yeah. Next, the space race. As we said before, the the space race is all about beating the Soviets. And key in point, the first thing they wanted to do was send people to space. The Soviets got the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, in and the Americans beat them though because they got someone on another object, the moon in this case. July 1969, Neil Armstrong walked on the moon.
The moon belongs to America and America only. It only shines for Americans.
You know what's funny about that whole one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, and him planting the flag?
Mhm.
As soon as they took back off, it fell down. It's still on the ground.
Is it really? That's so
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. Let me double check, but I'm pretty sure
It's still on the
yeah,
ground.
fell over.
Oh my gosh. Because it's not
Yes.
ours. It doesn't belong to you.
Yeah, it says because the astronauts struggled to push the pole deeper than 7 to 9 inches, it cannot withstand the blast of when they took off. So it remains lying flat on the ground, and the colors have likely bleached white due to the sun's harsh ultraviolet rays.
It's the moon's flag now.
Yeah,
It's now the color of the moon. Well, I mean, the moon isn't like stark white or anything, but
yeah. Well, the moon's made of cheese.
oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, like, how could it even be real? Because, like, is space even real? And also, why are the planets round?
Whoa, you've been taking a little bit of the LSD from the previous section. You're asking the questions now.
I just love thinking of, like, people seeing this and, like, hearing this and knowing the different technological advances and everything, and you're seeing all these crazy stuff for the first time, and granted, I understand why that was kind of like, "No, the moon landing was fake," but you have all this evidence that it's like, "No, they are in space." And even now, like, the latest, exploration they did where they went around the moon and came back, people I was seeing people that were like, "No, it wasn't real. They just, like, harbored them somewhere." And I was like, "Bitch, they got footage." They got them in the spaceship this time. Like, it's so funny. I love seeing people's stupidity and incompetence. I'm like, "You're rebelling in the wrong way." I don't know. It's like your passion is there, but the direction, you're not going in the one direction.
um yeah, it is kind of interesting that like while America just like argued on Earth, they seem to unite briefly, watching humanity walk on the moon.
Yeah, it's like the equivalent of everybody uniting over the World Cup,
Yes,
even
it's a
though
beautiful thing. Not
yeah,
not for the U.S., but yeah.
yeah.
Um, so the kind of climax of the 1960 happens in 1968, which I think still is the one of the most, if not the most turbulent year in American history. We have two major assassinations, a couple assassination attempts, and yeah. So first, the big assassination attempts are of Martin Luther King and of Robert Kennedy, two big figures, one who helped advance civil rights, another one who seemed to also want to do a lot for civil rights and just like America in general. Um, Martin Luther King was kind of just shot while he was outside on his balcony, and Robert Kennedy was shot like right as the Democratic National Convention was like occurring for when he was going to run for president. Um, there were nationwide riots, you know, just over everything happening, over civil unrest, over police brutality, over civil rights, over just everything that was happening. It was like it's kind of like that movie Do the Right Thing, where everything kind of just heats up and gets like really intense just in the span of like a few minutes. Just like that was like the culmination of it, like a popped popcorn kernel, essentially. Just everything just exploded. I mentioned the Tet Offensive before, and it's one of the factors in leading Lyndon B. Johnson, who took over after JFK was assassinated, to step down because he actually was going to run for another term and he would have been the longest serving president since FDR. He would have been able to serve 10 years because and it's allowed. It would have been allowed because usually you get two terms, but because JFK was assassinated halfway into his term, um, he got to serve out the rest of JFK's term, and then he got elected to his first term, his first full term, and then um, got he was going to run for another term for the 1968 election, but after all like the civil unrest and just like social upheaval and stuff like that, the protests and everything. He gives this speech in 1968 and he just goes, I will not accept the nomination. And so a different Democrat runs in 1968. I don't remember his name, unfortunately, but he did not win. Um, But in terms of protests and unrest, there was also the Democratic National Convention protest in Chicago, Columbia University protests. There was Prague Spring. There was the Mexico City Olympics and that Black Power salute where there's like the two black guys doing the fist, and then the one white guy who I think he's wearing something in support with them. Can't remember his name. Um, but it's a lot. It's a lot, and the '60s fully end in my opinion, just like with like the murders of Sharon Tate by the Manson family, which I mentioned earlier, the whole commune thing and the cult thing. It kind of but those murders kind of end the whole counterculture, free love, let's just all live together in peace type of era. And it begins a bit more of like a cynical decade leading into the 70s. But by the end of the decade, segregation had been dismantled. Youth culture had been a powerful political force. Trust in the government is starting to erode almost completely. Television connected the nation in unprecedented ways. Music and entertainment are vehicles for activism. The space race reached its climax, and traditional ideas about race, gender, politics, authority, they're all being challenged. And, the 1960s weren't turbulent because of one event. They were turbulent because dozens of revolutions happened simultaneously. A generation that questioned everything: who held power, who deserved equality, what America stood for, what the future should look like. The debates that defined the 60s didn't end when the calendar turned 1970. In many ways, they're still shaping the conversations that we had today. Any closing thoughts on this,
Yeah.
Peyton?
Um, Again, art is so political. Keep making art. Keep making art. It is so important into different conversations we're still having to have today. Um, and also, did you know that sea monkeys were patented in 1962?
I know that now.
And that, did you also know that there's okay. He wants to finish out the episode. Um, I don't know what else I was gonna say. I got a little bit distracted. But this is my dog Jarvis, and he's all for the political revolutions, but not cults. And he's also very excited to talk about the 70s.
All right, then. I hope you guys like this episode. It's a bit longer than we've been doing the past couple, but we kind of need to stretch everything out. So, yeah. Tune in for when we cover the 70s. Take care and goodbye.